Hello, this is David Rovix with another episode of my occasional podcast, This Week with David Rovix. You can find this podcast and my more frequent one, Song for Today, on all the usual podcasting platforms. Also, as long as the crisis lasts, I'll be doing a regular multi-platform live-streamed broadcast every Monday at 10 a.m. U.S. Pacific Time, along with various other such broadcasts. If you want to make sure to stay abreast of such developments, you can sign on to my email list at davidrovix.com or get the free David Rovix mobile app on your phone. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, and Patreon. Songs and broadcasts related to the crisis will also be kept in one place at davidrovix.com/quarantine. Okay, on to the substance of the podcast. Humanity, on any given day, is experiencing reality in very different ways. As a writer writing about the world around me and about things that have happened in the past, I spend a lot of time imagining what it's like to be someone else. There are key moments in my own life that caused this innate tendency to become more obsessive later. Chief among those moments are the times when I lost close friends to an early death, and when close friends went off to prison for carrying out politically motivated actions of the sort that I only sing about. Almost every day since I first lost a friend to an early death almost 3 decades ago now, I have felt privileged to be alive. And every day since I first had friends who one way or another ended up being sentenced to decades of confinement in a small box, I have very consciously cherished each morning I wake up once again in the free world. As much as I, like other writers of whatever sort, spend much of my time trying to get into the heads of other people, or trying to imagine what it was like to live through a certain historical period, or to be a certain person at a certain time or place, I find the prospect of trying to do that now much more overwhelming than usual. Because as vastly different as life was for different people in different situations around the world last month, this month, it's a whole other story. Without even thinking about trying to do anything about the situation, just imagining it is so challenging. Picture being a passionate lover of life, nature, and humanity, who finds yourself living in a box with a lock on it that you don't have any control over 23 hours a day, with 1 hour a day to spend on a small patch of monocropped grass, surrounded by tall fence with barbed wire on top of it. Now imagine being in that same situation while waiting for a pandemic to infect most of the population of the prison, knowing that there's also a severe shortage of ventilators and other necessary equipment to keep patients alive and medical practitioners safe. At least in that situation, you'll be fed something 3 times a day, even if it's barely palatable. For so many people in India right now, not allowed to leave the crowded one-room shacks so many people live in with their extended families, people are going hungry. So many people who don't eat enough on a normal day, earning money for food from day to day, who have no capacity to prepare for an eventuality like a lockdown, and no ability to conduct themselves according to the strictures of social isolation, which only works if you have somewhere to isolate yourself in, and you're not sharing a compost toilet with 100 other people, or just squatting in the street, as so many still do, from New Delhi to Los Angeles. As the quarantine continues for so much of the world, including in almost all of the countries I've ever traveled in, or where I know anyone, most people in my social circles would fall into the category of people who live within an industrialized country with some kind of functioning state, who have been to one degree or another financially impacted by the locking down of their societies, but who, with some assistance from those functioning states and other resources, will probably pull through okay when the pandemic is over, at least if they don't die of COVID-19 or from the lack of ventilators or face masks. To the surprise of many, there's even bipartisan consensus within the U.S. government that gig economy workers like myself should qualify for unemployment compensation, something I've never qualified for in my life. They're even going to send us all checks separate from that prospect. Universal basic income suddenly instituted in the least likely of countries, for a month or 2 anyway. It's not nearly enough, but it seems they're intent on keeping us from starving or rebelling. They've even banned evictions for a few months in some states, such as Oregon. All else aside, though, even if you're not fearing imminent eviction, Even if you have money for stockpiling groceries, even if you live somewhere with hot running water, electricity, and all the sorts of things in life that so many of us tend to take for granted to one degree or another. The social isolation measures that most of society seems to have undertaken, certainly here in the southeast collection of neighborhoods of Portland, Oregon, are very difficult for a lot of people, as well as radically different for different people. For many people, quarantining themselves means being alone. It's temporary and more or less self-imposed, but it is a form of solitary confinement. People are naturally spending inordinate amounts of time online or otherwise engaged with distracting themselves through screen-related activities, which may often involve some form of interaction with other real people through the internet. As anyone knows who has been in this kind of isolation for one reason or another for an extended period, or even for a couple days, all the plans you might have had to accomplish great things during your extended time alone are often subsumed by the depression that sets in from the lack of the kind of social interaction that feels real and fulfilling, like touching other people, what the Japanese call skinship. I personally have long realized that after 4 hours of solitude for activities like writing or reading, I want human contact for at least a little while before the next round of solitude, or I might not even be able to do anything constructive with it. I need to be recharged by human contact. That currently feels like a very distant memory, as in recent weeks, solitude is probably what I miss the most. Through the din of my new reality, I hear the distant voices of these truly isolated people out there, and it makes me also want to spend hours a day exploring the potential of the internet, to have meaningful interaction with the quarantined masses, maybe host a live-streamed open mic using StreamYard, the way I used to host open mics in cafes with physical people. But for me and my family, that kind of isolation is not how it is. Isolation from society, yes, but being in a room alone or in an apartment, no. The experience of society shutting down like it has reminded me of a certain Star Trek episode when the Doctor finds herself alone on the ship after everybody else on the ship disappears one by one. Of all my family members, I think it's probably hardest for my wife, Reiko. I have an active social life when I'm on tour, and my spring tour plans all appear to have been canceled, so I'm spending much more time at home than I normally would be in a typical spring. But I'm also fairly accustomed to a certain form of social isolation. During the 7 or so months of a typical year that I'm home, I rarely have substantial interaction with people other than my wife and kids, except in emails or on social media or the very occasional phone call. Though I do generally have blocks of time free for reading, writing, and playing music, what I generally refer to as working for the purposes of household operations, this time actually exists because of the social engagement of everybody else in the family, even the baby. But that's all gone, or on hold. It began in weird fits and starts. At first it seemed it would only really be relevant for the pop stars and politicians. No gatherings of more than 1,000 people was being thrown around as a virus-limiting concept. Okay, so I won't be singing for any protests, but then the tour can go on. Then it was no gatherings of more than 50 suddenly. Most of my gigs are still safe theoretically, but would anyone come to them? Me and so many other touring musicians wondered simultaneously. Then it was 20. Tour canceled. Then they closed the schools. Then they closed everything else and told us all to stay home. As the world began closing and society began physically distancing and mostly just disappearing from sight, people here evidently believe in community and solidarity and are taking this thing extremely seriously. Reiko's instinct was, as always, a community-driven one. It's not rational, perhaps, under the circumstances, but it's so human and so touching for me to experience from my vantage point. Society is closing. Then what are people doing? I could hear her silently wondering. The parks are closed. We can't go to the playgrounds. The play equipment might have the virus on it, so it's better to do things like run on the sidewalk or the grass, staying away from other people while you do it, if the adults and the kids need exercise. The schools are closed, but people were gathering, socially distanced, on the high school sports field nearby. Now this is what people are doing, so we'll join in, I could almost hear Reiko thinking. Ever the community builder, raised in community as she was, with the neighborhood Nishigaoka Community Center just down the road from the house she grew up in Japan, where she and the other children from the neighborhood went most every morning of every summer to exercise together and greet each day. Intellectually, I, of course, didn't need to explain the concept of social isolation to her. She's highly intelligent and reads the news too. She could see that her community instincts, or the aspect of them that desires a sense of community, were not in keeping with what was being asked of us, and of so many people around the world, to isolate. Reiko would suggest we take the kids to the sports field, and I then proposed that perhaps it's best if we just go play on the field near our apartment complex where there are currently no people. My heart burns a little each time I see the pain of the recognition on her face that this is probably the more community-spirited thing to do that would keep us more isolated. When she heard through another local parent of small children that the local elementary school was giving away food for kids, although we had no need for such handouts, Reiko was curious what they were giving away and who was going to be there. I was too, but not enough to bother actually going to find out. But she was going, so I went with her and witnessed the sad, empty scene with a handful of spaced-apart people giving out big bags of processed food. The giving out of food was going to end from that day, too, they told us. They gave us extra bags for us to share with our neighbors. They had too many bags and too few people taking them. The bubble fully enclosed. This was the last time we attempted any kind of semi-social activity beyond trips to the supermarket, where you can see the abundant quantities of fresh vegetables, the complete lack of toilet paper, and the intensely stressed, harried faces of the underpaid, overexposed workers there, who are now supposed to be feeling lucky that they're employed, according to some among their customers. Reiko does engage in various sorts of solitary endeavors, reading books, writing different sorts of things, but much of her life involves society pretty directly. For me, being a parent involves a certain amount of social interaction with other kids and other parents at school and elsewhere. For Reiko, there is the vast added dimension that the school our toddler goes to is also a center of life for the local Japanese-speaking community, which Reiko is actively involved with in many ways. Then there's tennis, which Reiko normally plays almost daily, usually with other people, usually in community centers owned by Parks and Rec. Then there are 2 weekly Japanese language playgroups that also involve Reiko, our toddler, and our baby. Our teenager, Layla, if she weren't in school, would usually be climbing the walls of the rock gym. I never fully realized how much time I used to spend alone in this apartment when I was home from touring. Now, to have any time alone to write or to think, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. The rest of the day will be fully occupied with keeping a toddler and a baby happy and well cared for, physically and emotionally. In our small apartment, there is no rec room in which to set up a TV studio like at Joe Biden's place. And if there were one, how would you keep the toddler from coming in? Lock him out? The reason, I assume, why all the websites have warnings on them that everything is taking longer than usual is not just that more people are on the web than ever before, but also because working from home while your kids are not at school and you have no one to take care of them just doesn't work. In our case, the combination of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, a toddler and a baby, is basically just plain dangerous. If you don't have a well-planned structure for a day of isolation with a toddler and a baby, you're going to have a very unhappy family. Toddlers with babies are just like canaries in coal mines. If there's tension in the air, that toddler is going to knock that baby to the ground again, you can be sure. You prevent that scenario not by strapping the toddler down to a chair and drugging him, but by making his life fulfilling and interesting and interactive. If he has no other children to interact with, guess what? It's all on you, and there is no division of labor in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 children. It's all for one and one for all, and if you want any time alone, your options are very early in the morning or very late at night. As hard as it might be to try to imagine what it's like for adults in different situations to experience the quarantine scene, it's really hard to imagine what my toddler is going through. Suddenly, there is no school, no playmates. Suddenly, other kids and parents never come to visit anymore, and he never visits them. Suddenly, when we go outside, there's almost no one else around. We do live in a pretty sleepy residential neighborhood, but usually there are other people within view when you go outside, especially when it's not raining. And when, on the rare occasion, we do see people he knows, who would normally give him a high five or a hug, both of which he usually enjoys depending on the person, now they stand awkwardly distant, self-consciously trying not to accidentally spit as they talk. Just as he's opening up to the world and becoming very social in the way that 3-year-olds often do, everything shifts like this. I may continue to fantasize about being one of the lonely ones for a while longer, and I'll certainly keep imagining what it's like for different people in different circumstances at this incredibly trying time for so many around the world. But as far as daily life goes, for the foreseeable future, I'll be here, fully inundated in a quarantined form of parenthood that I never imagined existing until now. And I'll be looking forward to the re-emergence of society, with all its flaws, because I miss it like I never knew I could. This could be a teachable moment, though it more just looks like a mess. How long the moment might last is anyone's guess. For all of the bold propaganda, what kind of system is best? The moments like this one are the test. Where did they stay ahead of the curve? Where did they just run out of soap? Once the world shut down its borders, which countries were able to cope? Once this pandemic is over, this could be a teachable moment, the moment we find out how much it can be so hard to get through just a day when you can't touch someone that you know, to hold their hands in yours. How interminable the walls, the ceilings, floors. How long a day goes on, how lonely life can be, how much we're all a part of a society. Once this pandemic is over, this could be a teachable moment where anyone with half a brain understands that we're all just as good as the weakest link in the chain. With exponential growth, one for all and all for one is the only way to hope to slow such a viral run. With some of us in mansions and others left in tents, while what's drifting in the air won't be kept out by a fence. Once the pandemic is over, this could be a teachable moment, though at the price of so many lives lost, to be stratified and divided. Death is the cost. After all of the funerals, after we've mourned all the dead, might we then have a world that's bound by a common thread? A thread that is sewn like a virus and connects us all worldwide. Maybe then we can say there's a reason your grandparents died. Once this pandemic is over, once this pandemic is over. This has been an episode of This Week with David Rovics. You can also hear this on the internet radio station, folkmusicnotebook.com, where they're currently featuring daily shelter-in-place showcases. Hope to see you sometime soon here in the Matrix.